بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وفقهنا إذا جهلنا وزدنا علما نافعا وعملا متقبلا يا كريم اللهم انفعنا بالقرآن العظيم واجعله لنا إماما ونورا وهدى ورحمة يا أرحم الراحمين وبعد. So this is I think it's the fourth session in which we're studying some passages from the Quran. في شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن, in the month of Ramadan, in which the Quran was revealed, in which we have a duty to increase our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we said in one of the first sessions, that's perhaps the clearest gauge that a person has about how his fast is going. Your relationship with the Quran is the clearest way that you can measure whether your fast is successful or otherwise. We'll also continue as an introduction to read from some narrations that come in this in a blessed work written by Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin, rahimahullah ta'ala. He's a great scholar from Halab, from Aleppo, who passed away around 15, 20 years ago. And he wrote this work called Tilawat al-Quran al-Majid, recitation of the majestic Quran, in which he brings many hadith that speak about the virtues and the merits of reading the Quran, and every single day, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And we'll try and read some of the hadith, just to finish off what we read of, what we were reading yesterday from his book. We were reading some tradition, the hadith that spoke about how the Quran, how a house in which the Quran is recited shines and illuminates for the inhabitants of the heavens, like the angels, just as the stars shine for the people on the earth. So just as when we look up to the sky, we see the stars, the angels, when they look down into the heaven, into the earth, they see houses in which Quran is being recited. And to confirm this, another hadith from Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu anhum. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn As radiallahu anhum relates from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, كل آية في القرآن درجة في الجنة. كل آية في القرآن درجة في الجنة ومصباح في بيوتكم. Every ayah in the Quran is a level inside the paradise. Every ayah in the Quran is a level inside the paradise. Based upon that statement and similar statements from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, many of the people of knowledge, they mention that within every single Jannah, there's 6,236 levels. Within every single, so you have Sab'a Jinan, you have 7 Jannah, 7 paradise. The Prophet said, every ayah in the Quran is a level inside the Jannah. And there's 6,236 ayahs in the Quran, which would then tell us that within every one of the 7 Jannahs, there are 6,236 levels within every one. And as we'll see in a hadith to come, when a person enters into his Jannah, he's told, Iqra, wartaqi. He'll be told inside Jannah, read and rise as you used to read in this world. So, and Ashab al-Quran, those who are habitual in reading the Quran, or everybody, once you enter into Jannah, you'll be told, read the Quran. And this is not just hifz of Quran, this is somebody who's habitual in reading the Quran. Somebody has a habit of reading the Quran all the time, it will come to him at that point, and he'll start reciting, and he'll rise to the level that he used to read to. So somebody who doesn't finish much of the Quran will be a lower level within that Jannah. But somebody who's constantly doing khatamat of the Quran, constantly finishing the Quran, will be at the highest level of that particular Jannah that person's in. So كل آية في القرآن درجة في الجنة. Every ayah of the Quran is a level, is a degree inside the Jannah. ومصباح في بيوتكم. And it's a lamp or it's a light inside of your homes. It's a lamp or it's a light inside of your homes. And as the previous hadith mentioned, it's a light that shines up into the heavens that the angels recognize as being Buyut Ahl al-Quran. Buyut Ahl al-Quran. And that's the houses of people of Quran. And another hadith that speaks about how the Quran, it brings fragrance and beauty towards the believer. It's tatyib al-qari. And it's the tayyib, the fragrance that you put on, that you rub onto you. The real fragrance is the fragrance of the Quran. The real fragrance for a believer is the fragrance that emanates from his recitation of the Quran. So the Prophet ﷺ spoke about this when he said, and he gave four types of people. Two descriptions of the believer, two descriptions of the munafiq, of the hypocrite. He ﷺ said, مثل المؤمن الذي يقرأ القرآن مثل الأترجة ريحها طيب وطعمها طيب. The first likeness the Prophet ﷺ gave is the likeness of the believer who recites the Quran is like a citrus fruit. It's like a citrus fruit, أترجة. ريحها طيب وطعمها طيب. The smell that it gives off is pleasant and the taste it has is pleasant. And that's the nature of the believer. The believer, روحه طيب. The believer, because he's min ahl al-iman, because he's a person of faith, his soul is in a pure state. So his ta'am is tayyib. And the taste of that believer, because his being is a being of faith, it's in a pure state. It's in a fragrant state. But what gives off the fragrance is the Quran. ريحها طيب وطعمها طيب. And the difference there, like that citrus fruit, if you bit into it, you'll taste something, you'll get a nice taste out of it. But it also gives off a nice smell. And the believer, he's pure by nature because he's min ahl la ilaha illallah, because he's somebody that la ilaha illallah within him. But the fragrance that comes out of him is from the Quran that he recites. The fragrance that comes off him is from the Quran that he recites. That's the first type of person. Number two, then the Prophet ﷺ said, وَمَثَلُ الْمُؤْمِنِ الَّذِي لَا يَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنَ مَثَلُ التَّمْرَةِ لَا رِيحَ لَهَا وَطَعْمُهَا حُلْوٌ. The likeness of a believer who does not recite the Quran is like a date. Tamra is like a date. It has no fragrance, it has no smell to it, it has nothing pleasant that comes off it, but it tastes sweet. And he's still a mu'min, even though he doesn't read Quran. He's still a mu'min, he's still a believer, he's still min ahl al-iman. He still has faith within, and that faith makes his being pure. But he's not giving off fragrant smells. And as we read yesterday, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the believer who has nothing within his jawf, nothing within him of the Quran, is kalbayt al-kharib. It's like an empty house. It's like a deserted house. But he still is a house. Even though it's empty and there's no furnishing within the house, there's no decorations within the house, the believer has no Quran with him. It's an empty house. It's just a shell of a believer. But there's still a shell that's there. And here the Prophet ﷺ describes that shell as being sweet in nature, like a date, but it's not giving off any fragrant smells. The third type, وَمَثَلُ الْمُنَافِقِ الَّذِي يَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنَ مَثَلُ الرَّيْحَانَةِ رِيحُهَا طَيِّبٌ وَطَعْمُهَا مُرٌّ. And then the third type of person the Prophet ﷺ described is a munafiq, is a hypocrite. And a hypocrite by nature, his zahir is tayyib, his batin is khabith. His outer is good because he says, نَشْهَدُ أَنَّكَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. We testify that you are the messenger of God. وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ إِنَّكَ رَسُولُ وَاللَّهُ يَشْهَدُ إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَكَاذِبُونَ. They will come to the Prophet ﷺ and say, we testify that you are the messenger of God. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah knows you're the messenger. وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ إِنَّكَ رَسُولُ. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاللَّهُ يَشْهَدُ إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَكَاذِبُونَ. Allah testifies that the hypocrites are liars. And we should always bear in mind that there's two types of munafiq. There's one munafiq, nifaq al-iman and nifaq al-suluk. There's a hypocrite in his faith. Somebody who inside of him, he rejects Allah and His Messenger, rejects the Quran, rejects Yawm al-Qiyam, rejects everything about faith, but on his tongue he professes faith. He says he's a Muslim, but in his heart he doesn't believe anything. And that's the munafiq that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of in the Quran, condemns the worst type of human being, إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِي الدَّرْكِ الْأَسْفَلِ مِنَ النَّارِ, that those type of hypocrites are in the lowest level of hellfire. And that's what the Prophet is speaking of here. مَثَلُ الْمُنَافِقِ الَّذِي يَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنِ, the hypocrite who recites the Quran is like a rayhana. Is like a rayhana, and a rayhana is a plant which gives off a nice fragrant smell, but it's bitter, has a bitter taste to it. A bitter tasting plant that gives off a nice fragrant smell. In this parable here, the third type, the Prophet, the munafiq is the worst type of human being. إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِي الدَّرْكِ الْأَسْفَلِ مِنَ النَّارِ. They're in the lowest level of hellfire. Yet just by that person reading Quran, he's giving off these fragrance odors and fragrant smells. Even the worst type of human being, should he recite Quran, even though his nature is foul, even though his nature is foul and odious, but he's still giving off these pleasant, fragrant smells. وَمَثَلُ الْمُنَافِقِ الَّذِي لَا يَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنَ كَمَثَلِ الْحَنْظَلَةِ لَيْسَ لَهَا رِيحٌ وَطَعْمُهَا مُرٌّ. And the munafiq, the hypocrite, who does not read any Quran, is like a plant that's known as al-handhala. Al-handhala. That has no smell, no pleasant, no fragrant smell coming out of it, and it has a bitter, nasty taste to it. The important one is the first description. There's 4 descriptions given. The important one is the first description. مثل المؤمن الذي يقرأ القرآن مثل الأترجة ريحها طيب وطعمها طيب. Like an utrujja, a Muslim, a believer who recites the Quran, recites it frequently, constantly. Frequent, constant, doesn't need to be large amounts, although in Ramadan it should be large amounts, but it doesn't need to be large amounts, but it should be constant reading of the Quran. That person keeps on reading the Quran. He's min ahl al-iman, he's a person of faith, he has a pure nature to him, and he gives off that pure smell from the Quran. The next hadith that speaks about the Quran and the relationship. The Quran is jala' al-qulub. The Quran is a polisher of the hearts. It's a polisher of the hearts. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّ هَذِهِ الْقُلُوبَ تَصْدَأ إِنَّ هَذِهِ الْقُلُوبَ تَصْدَأ كَمَا يَصْدَأُ الْحَدِيدُ إِذَا أَصَابَهُ الْمَاءُ. First, the Prophet ﷺ said, the hearts of human beings, they become rusty. The Prophet ﷺ rust. But in the Quran, we're told what causes that rust. What's the cause of that rust? كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, in fact, there's rust on their hearts بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ, because of what they do. The sins, the Prophet told the sins leave a dark mark inside of the heart. Every time you commit a sin and you don't do tawbah, there's no repentance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's no shedding tears in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nothing dark. And the nature of rust on metal, it doesn't come off easy. Rust does not come off easy. It's not simple. The rust of sin on the heart of the believer doesn't come away easy. And that rust in the heart is what keeps that distance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the people of knowledge, Ahl al-Ilm, they mention, and this is on a slightly different level, they said there's two things that affect the heart. It says al-ma'asiyah, sins darken the heart. Sins darken the heart. And al-ghafla, and al-ghafla is the opposite of dhikr. Being heedless and forgetful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hardens the heart. It hardens the heart. So al-ma'asiyah تورث الران والغفلة تورث القساوة. So sins produce rust. It causes rust on the heart. But it's not just sins that affects the heart. Anything other than dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will affect the heart. Even doing those things that seem neutral, which are not really neutral, that has an impact on the heart. It causes qasawa. It causes a hardness to descend on the heart, and a heart that's hard does not respond to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? The description of the believers that comes in the Quran, وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. And the believers are those whose hearts stir and shake, and when his verses are recited, زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا, it increases them in faith. And a heart that's soft, that hasn't been hardened by heedlessness, and hasn't been darkened by sin, that's a heart that responds. And the fear and danger is the hardened hearts become like rocks, like stone and rocks. Nothing can enter into it. Water passes over it, but water can't penetrate into it. So the Prophet spoke about the rust that enters onto the heart, just like metal rust. قيل يا رسول الله وما جلاؤها. قيل يا رسول الله وما جلاؤها. Some of the companions asked the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what's the polish for it? What's the polish that removes the rust on the hearts, the rust of sins? What's its polish? What will wipe away the effects of sin? قال كثرة ذكر الموت وتلاوة القرآن. Thinking a lot about death and reciting the Quran. Thinking a lot about death and reciting the Quran. So constant reading the Quran has an impact upon the heart. But it's a two-way relationship. There's a difficulty and there's an easy part and there's a difficult part. To get rid of the dirt in the heart, you just need you to read a lot of the Quran. But the dirt in the heart stops you from reading the Quran. The dirt in the heart becomes a barrier between a person reading the Quran. A heart that's full of rust and filth of sin, that heart becomes distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it becomes distant from kalam Allah, becomes distant from the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So although at the same time it is the polish that will wash away the rust on the heart, but it's the very same thing that acts as a barrier. That rust itself acts as a barrier from that person getting close to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَأَكْثِرُوا مِنْ قِرَاءَةِ الْقُرْآنِ. So a person has to read a lot of Quran so that it polishes the heart of the dirt and the sin. And whenever you realize you've done some ma'asi, you've done some dhanb, whenever you realize you've done some sin, and it's not just a normal sin, right? Where you feel it. One of the problems with sin, when a person gets so used to and accustomed to committing sin, it's like filth, like dirt. If you're pure and you don't, like, let's say you're always wearing clean clothes, and you're always particular about your appearance and smell and so on, even the smallest amount of filth on you affects you. Like people who are pure in nature, the smallest of sin will affect them. The smallest of sin will affect. The likes of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, who had photographic memory. He'd look at a page and he's memorized it. He's looked at a page and he has photographic memory. One time he's going to class with his teacher Waqi', and on the way there, by accident, he happens to look at the shin of a woman, which is not even a sin. Because he did it by accident. The bottom of the leg of a woman, it was shown, and by accident, he happened to look at it. He sits in front of his ustad, his teacher. He's trying to memorize, and he's gone completely blank. He goes completely blank. He's lost the ability to memorize. شَكَوْتُ إِلَى وَكِيعٍ سُوءَ حِفْظِي. Expresses his state at that moment in words of poetry by saying, I complained to Waqi' about my weak memory. فَأَرْشَدَنِي إِلَى تَرْكِ الْمَعَاصِي. He guided me to stop committing sins. وَأَخْبَرَنِي بِأَنَّ الْعِلْمَ نُورٌ وَنُورُ اللَّهِ لَا يُهْدَى لِلْعَاصِي. And he told me that knowledge is a light, and the light of God is not given to sinners. That knowledge is a light, and the light of God is not gifted to sinners. He was so affected by it because he was in such a pure state. He was so affected by the smallest of things because he was in such a pure state. But somebody who's constantly committing sin, you won't notice it. Right? That speck of dirt is noticed by Imam Shafi'i. But committing major sin after major sin after major sin, like ghiba and kadhib and buhtan, backbiting and lying and swearing and looking at haram and listening to haram, it comes a point where it has no effect on you anymore. There comes a point where that constant immersion in sin has no effect anymore. but it requires the Quran. The Quran is what's going to cleanse that person from the effects of that sin. The next hadith about the merit and the rank of the Quran. And this hadith is well known, but it needs to be seen in context. Because although it's well known, there's one line in that people always seem to miss out. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من قرأ القرآن وعمل به ألبس الله والديه تاجا يوم القيامة ضوءه أحسن من ضوء الشمس في بيت من بيوت الدنيا لو كانت فيه فما ظنكم بالذي عمل به. The one who recites the Quran and acts in accordance with it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place crown on his parents. Allah subhanahu will place a crown on his parents on the Day of Judgment, whose light will be better than Daw al-Shams, better than the sun shining into the houses of this world. If it was inside, if the sun was in the house, the shining radiance of the sun, the crown on the head of the parents is better than that. Sahib al-Quran. And then the Prophet said, if that's the parents, مَا ظَنُّكُمْ بِالَّذِي عَمَلَ بِهِ. What then about the one who acted in accordance with it? Problem with this hadith is always misread. This hadith is always, make my kids hafiz and I'm sorted. That's what it was. Just send them off, go and do hifz al-Quran and that's it. Don't worry about anything. Just get them to memorize the Quran and then I've got my crown on the Day of Judgment. I don't need to do anything. I can sit there on the Day of Judgment and I've got nothing to worry about. The bit that's always missed out. First, it doesn't, in this narration, it doesn't say man hafiz al-Quran. It doesn't say who memorized the Quran. It says who recites the Quran. But the second part's always missed out. وَعَمِلَ بِهِ. وَعَمِلَ, and acts in accordance with the Quran. It's not hafiz al-Quran. It's sahib al-Quran. This hadith isn't saying that if your child has memorized the whole of Quran, then on the Day of Judgment you'll get a crown. No, if your child lives with the Quran, he lives with the Quran, he's a walking Quran. He's like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Quran in yamshi. He was a Quran in motion. When they were asked about what's the khuluq, what's the behavior in the character of the Messenger, Sayyidah Aisha says, don't you read the Quran? Don't you read the Quran? His character, his behavior was the Quran. That's what the Prophet is talking about. Not somebody who has the whole of the Quran in his heart and then he's still doing ma'asi, he's still committing sin, he's still speaking haram, listening to haram, looking at haram and doing all types of haram. That person, the Quran will speak against that person. It's not that person will have crowns placed on the heads of the parents. That person, and then فَمَا ظَنُّكُمْ بِالَّذِي عَمِلَ. What about him himself? Him himself has got nothing to stand with the Quran. The Quran is hujjatun alayh. The Prophet said, Al-Qur'anu hujjatun laka aw alayk. The Quran will stand as a proof for you or against you. And Sahib al-Quran, that person who has Quran within him, doesn't recite it, doesn't reflect over it, doesn't try to live its meanings. It's better. It would have been better that he didn't memorize the Quran. It would have been better for him. It would have been better for him or safer with him that he hadn't memorized any of the Quran. So when we read this hadith, we should not be deluded into thinking, get our kids to memorize the Quran, everything's sorted on the Day of Judgment. No, get your kids to live by the Quran. Get your children to live by the Quran, then you have a guarantee with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next narrations speak about a general point. Ahlul Quran. I think we came across this hadith a couple of days ago, I think 2 days ago. Ahlul Quran, Ahlullahi wa khassatu. The people of the Quran, they are the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they are His special ones. They are His people, and they are His special ones. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He chooses His people. He chooses His people. And a sign that a person is being chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be from His elect, from His elite people, is his relationship with the Quran. Is his relationship with the Quran. If you look at the greats of this nation, beginning with the greatest sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they had the most powerful relationship with the Quran. The greats of the companions were ashab al-Quran. All the companions were people of the Quran. The greats of the companions, they were people of the Quran. You look at those who left the greatest legacy for this nation. Who's the greatest of the scholars of hadith? Imam al-Bukhari, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. These are the great Imams. Imam al-Bukhari is recorded as finishing the Quran daily. Every single day he would yakhtim al-Quran. Kull yawm. Every day he would finish the Quran. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, twice a day he would finish the Quran. The great legacy of law that came from Abu Hanif and Imam Shafi'i, both of them, daily khatam al-Quran. Daily khatam al-Quran. And so these are Ahlullah Ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed them or chose them to be those who left a legacy in this nation because He gave them the Quran, because they were Ahl al-Quran. So Ahl al-Quran, Ahlullah wa khasatu. The people of Quran, they are the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ala inna awliya Allahi la khawfun alayhim wa lahum yahzanun. Truly, the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have no fear for them, nor will they grieve about anything that they've left behind. And a hadith that will come, the Prophet ﷺ spoke about Ahlul Quran. They are the ones when all people be terrified on the day of judgment. Ahwal yawm al-qiyamah. All of those terrifying moments that we can't even begin to imagine of in this world. But the end of this world, we're told that a pregnant woman will drop its child. A pregnant woman will go into miscarriage just by the shakings of Yawm al-Qiyamah. A woman who's breastfeeding a child just abandon a child, like the fear. And a person who's got normal black hair, his hair will turn white. His hair will turn white. The terrors leading up to the Day of Judgment, let alone what will come on the Day of Judgment itself. The Prophet said, those who have this relationship with the Quran, they'll be safe from any terrors on that day. Like the terrifying moments, Ahwal Yawm al-Qiyamah. Yawm al-Qiyamah, that person of the Quran is protected. They'll have no fear whatsoever. La khawfun alayhim wa lahum yahzanun. They will have no fear, nor will they grieve about anything that they left behind in this world. So Ahl al-Quran, they are the ones that were chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have a responsibility and a duty to honor the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to honor the sacred symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Whoever honors the symbols of Allah, that's from taqwa of the heart. That's from fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within the heart. And the Quran and Ahlul Quran are amongst the greatest of the sha'air of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Amongst the greatest of the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Quran and those that He gave the Quran to. The Quran and those that He gave the Quran to. So as part of that, we honor the Quran first by reciting it. We honor the Quran by reciting it. The Quran is not a decoration that's meant for the houses. It decorates the houses, but it decorates the believers first. It decorates the believers first. So we honor the Quran by reciting the Quran. We honor the Quran by placing it above. There should be no book above the Quran. There should be nothing in the homes above the Quran. Whatever book that you have, the Quran should always be above. في صحف مطهرة أو في صحف مرفوعة مطهرة. مرفوعة مطهرة. Allah, when He describes the pages in Quran, marfu'ah, and Quran is raised, mutahhara, purified. So there has to be an honoring of the Quran. Imam al-Nawawi in his brilliant work, which everybody should have a copy of, Etiquette with the Quran. It's translated in English and it's an excellent translation. Etiquette with the Quran of Imam al-Nawawi. He said it is etiquette with the Quran that if somebody walks in with a copy of the Quran, that you stand for the Quran. That when somebody walks in with a copy of the Quran, that you stand for the Quran. Just as people of nobility and honor, those who are to be respected, it's sunnah to stand for them. It's sunnah to stand for them. The one that we're most negligent with, and Imam al-Ghazali and others, they mention this, is that if your parents enter the room, that you should stand for them. If your father and mother enter into the room, that you should stand for them. Anybody of nobility and honor that is to be respected, you should stand for them. If that's a human being, then the Quran, more so. That's Imam al-Nawawi's argument. That if you're required, or as an etiquette, it's good for you to stand for certain people of honor and respect. And the Prophet told some of the Sahaba, the Ansar, When the leader of the Ansar, Sayyidina Sa'ad ibn Ubadah, he entered, he told the people, قُومُوا لِسَيِّدِكُمْ, stand for your master. قُومُوا لِسَيِّدِكُمْ, stand for your master. If that's people, then the Quran is more worthy of being honored, is more worthy of being honored in that manner. So the Quran, being from sha'airillah, being from the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to be honored, is to be respected and to be honored. But the people of the Quran are also to be respected and honored in that manner. The people of the Quran are also to be respected and honored in the same manner. And this comes from a statement to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inna min ijlalillahi ta'ala إكرام ذي الشيبة المسلم وحامل القرآن غير الغالي فيه والجافي عنه وإكرام ذي السلطان المقسط. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, part of honoring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ijlalillah, and us showing honor towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are signs for that. Number one is that you honor an elderly Muslim. And the sign of an elderly Muslim, somebody has white hairs, shayba, a shayb. Somebody has white hairs as a Muslim, you honor him. That's part of honoring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ikrama the shaybatil Muslim. Number two is that you honor Hamil al-Quran, the one who carries the Quran. The one who carries the Quran. But then the Prophet gave two qualifications to that. غير الغالي فيه والجافي عنه. غير الغالي, but not somebody who has the Quran but goes to extremes with the Quran. Extremes with the Quran. And some of them said extremes with the Quran. We mentioned ayat mutashabihat. There are some obscure verses in the Quran like Alif Lam Mim and Istawa al Arsh. There are certain words in the Quran that we can never know what's meant. And they're there to test our faith. We believe in it whether we understand it or not. But some of them said Al-Ghalifi, the one who goes to extremes with the Quran, is those who try to find meanings where meanings can't be found. Those who try to find meanings where meanings can't be found. So don't go to extremes with the Quran. Focus on those verses that are clear. Leave those verses. And it's only a handful of verses, not the majority of the Quran. Only a few verses in the Quran that are obscure in meaning, that are there to test our faith. Leave them. Part of going to extremes is that. وَالْجَافِي عَنْهُ. And then the Prophet also said, not to, and also the one who's distant from him. He's hamil al-Quran, like in jafi anhu. At the same time, he's distant. He has the Quran, but he's distant from the Quran. How can you have the Quran and be distant? By not reading it. By not reading it. How can you have the Quran and be distant from the Quran? By not reading the Quran. By not reading the Quran. That person should not be honored. Should not be honored. The one who has the Quran but goes to extremes with it or is distant from it. They should not be honored. So the Prophet said, honor the person of Quran who doesn't go to extremes with it, nor is distant from it. He reflects over the obvious meanings of it, and he's always reciting the Quran. And then the third one to be honored and respected, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi, which is a sign of ijlalillahi ta'ala, that you honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ikram this sultan al-muqsit, is to honor a leader who is just and fair. A leader who is just and fair. Which tells you, what that tells you is how difficult that is to be. A person who's in a position of power or authority, whether it's a political leader or a leader of an institution or a leader of a masjid or a leader of a home, even of a home, to be fair and just is the most difficult thing that there is. That's why if you know somebody who's a leader, whatever level in society is a leader, and he's fair and just, you should honor and respect that person. You should honor. He's the first one of the seven that the Prophet said will be shaded beneath the throne of Allah on the Day of Judgment. Imam Adil, a fair, a just leader. And then another hadith, another tradition to mention, and we've touched upon this. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, ثلاثة لا يهولهم الفزع الأكبر ولا ينالهم الحساب وهم على كثيب من المسك حتى يفرغ من حساب الخلائق. Three people, الفزع الأكبر, the most terrifying moments will not scare them. The most terrifying moments, on the Day of Judgment, the most terrifying moments will not scare them. nor will they be asked any questions. وَلَا يَنَالُهُمُ الْحِسَابِ. Nor will they be asked any questions, and they'll be on mounds of musk, sat there relaxing, until the questioning of creation has finished. There'll be three types of people. Nothing of the day of judgment will scare them. They will not be asked any questions, and they'll be on mounds made out of musk. It's relaxing until the questioning is over. Three types of people. Number one, رَجُلٌ قَرَأَ الْقُرْآنَ ابْتِغَاءَ وَجْهِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. Number one is a man or a person who reads the Quran only seeking the pleasure of God Almighty. A person who recites the Quran only seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has nothing to fear on the day of judgment. He'll not be asked any question on the day of judgment. He'll be relaxed while the rest of humanity is being questioned on the day of judgment. Number two, وَأَمَّا قَوْمٌ وَهُمْ بِهِ رَاضُونَ. A person who leads people in prayer, is the imam of a masjid or a jama'ah, and they're all happy with him. They're all happy with him. They're all problem with people, always moaning about the imam. They're always complaining about the imam. Sometimes there are issues with the imam. Not always. Sometimes there are genuine issues with the imam. Where you find a qawm, a people, they're happy with that imam who leads them in prayer. That imam, he has a rank with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That imam has a rank with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَهُمْ بِهِ رَاضُونَ. He leads people in prayer. وَهُمْ بِهِ رَاضُونَ. And they're happy with him leading them in prayer. And the third, وَدَاعٍ يَدْعُو إِلَى الصَّلَوَاتِ ابْتِغَاءَ وَجْهِ اللَّهِ. Afwan, my mistake. That imam, there is an extension of the first one. A man who recites the Quran, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and leads the people in prayer, and they're happy with him. That's all one. That's all one category. Number two, دَاعٍ يَدْعُو إِلَى الصَّلَوَاتِ ابْتِغَاءَ وَجْهِ اللَّهِ. A caller who calls people to prayer, only seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's a reference to the mu'adhin. The mu'adhin who only does that, seeking the pleasure of Allah, seeking reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is one of those people who will not be asked any question on the day of judgment. They will not be terrified at any moment on the day of judgment. And they'll be relaxing on mounds of musk on the day of judgment, waiting for the questioning to finish. وَعَبْدٌ أَحْسَنَ فِيمَا بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ رَبِّهِ وَفِيمَا بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ مَوَالِيهِ. And a slave who does good between him and his Lord, and he fulfills his duty towards his master. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. So that's some ahadith that speak about the merits and the virtue of the Quran. We're going to continue reading about that tomorrow, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Are there any questions on those ahadith, on those statements of the Prophet to do with the Quran? If there isn't, then we'll continue some more, or looking more at the words of Imam al-Bukhari about Surah Al-An'am. We were looking at Surah Al-An'am, chapter number 6 in the Quran, and we're looking at it through the lens of Sahih al-Bukhari, where Imam al-Bukhari begins that section by bringing words that are not easily understood within that surah. And what we're doing at the moment, just going through those words, just picking out the verses. So looking at what Imam al-Bukhari himself mentioned, and then looking at the words themselves within the context of the verses. So yesterday we looked at four words that Imam al-Bukhari mentions. The first of them, ثُمَّ لَمْ تَكُنْ فِتْنَتُهُمْ إِلَّا أَنْ قَالُوا وَاللَّهِ رَبِّنَا مَا كُنَّا مُشْرِكِينَ. That was from verse 23 in Surah Al-An'am. We also looked at ma'rushat, the word ma'rushat, وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَنْشَأَ جَنَّاتٍ مَعْرُوشَاتٍ وَغَيْرَ مَعْرُوشَاتٍ. He it is who brings into being gardens, trellised and untrellised. We looked at that yesterday, verse 141. And then after that, حَمُولَةً وَفَرْشًا وَمِنَ الْأَنْعَامِ حَمُولَةً وَفَرْشًا. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about a livestock that He gives you, حَمُولَةً, that which it is carried on, animals that you use to carry load on, وَفَرْشًا, and animals that are slaughtered to eat. And then the fourth word that we looked at was from verse number 9 in Surah Al-An'am, وَلَلَبَسْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ مَا يَلْبِسُونَ. When the kuffar and the unbelievers in Mecca, they brought an issue against the Prophet being a human prophet. Their argument being, if he was truly a messenger of God, then why didn't God Almighty send angels? God Almighty said, if he sent angels, he would have sent them in human form. If he sent it, and then we would have obscured to them what they were unsure about. The uncertainty and the objection would have remained against them. So they're the four words that we looked at yesterday. The next word, لِأُنذِرَكُمْ بِهِ وَمَنْ بَلَغَ. لِأُنذِرَكُمْ بِهِ. And this comes in verse 19. Verse 19 in Surah Al-An'am. Just to look at verse 19 in Surah Al-An'am. Because the beginning of Surah Al-An'am is all a response to the unbelievers in Mecca. It's all a response to the unbelievers in Mecca, just confirming faith in God Almighty and confirming faith in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one thing that we didn't mention at the beginning, one of the key tools that Allah employs in Surah Al-An'am is instructing the Prophet to answer questions back. If they ask you this, then respond in that manner. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responding to the questions that they're firing at the Prophet. And one general thing that you see in the Quran, and when you study the Quran and study the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, pretty much every objection that was leveled against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by the unbelievers is answered in the Quran. Pretty much every objection that the kuffar of Mecca they threw against the Prophet ﷺ comes in the Quran. The answer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers the objections against the Prophet ﷺ that come in the Quran. And that's why some of our teachers, they mention an important point. They said, to study the seerah, you have to study the Quran. And to study the Quran, you have to study the seerah. You cannot separate the two. You want to understand the life of the Messenger and you don't look at the Quran, you can't understand the life of the Messenger. It's impossible to understand the life of the Messenger without looking at the Quran. So here, like in Mecca, so much accusations are getting leveled against the Messenger. Where's the answers to be found? It's the Quran. It's the Quran. What's happening in Medina? War after war after war being fought. You want the lessons of Badr? Surah Al-Anfal. You want the lessons of Uhud? Ali Imran. You want the lessons of Ahzab? Surah Al-Ahzab. You want the lessons, like battles after battles after battles in Medina? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you what's going on inside the Quran. So you can't divorce the Quran from the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nor can you divorce a study of the Quran from a study of the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So here we have this verse 19. قُلْ أَيُّ شَيْءٍ أَكْبَرُ الشَّهَادَةِ قُلِ اللَّهُ شَهِيدٌ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكُمْ. This verse, Sabab al-Nuzul, the reason why this verse was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that some of the leaders of the unbelievers came to the Prophet in Mecca and they said, Ya Muhammad, they said, we cannot find anybody else who will confirm what you're saying is being true. We cannot find anybody else who will confirm that you're a messenger from God. We've asked the Jews, we've asked the Christians, and they're saying that we don't recognize you. They don't recognize you. So then the unbelievers of Mecca, they're lying. All of what they're saying, they're lying. فَأَرِنَا مَنْ يَشْهَدُ لَكَ أَنَّكَ رَسُولٌ كَمَا تَزْعُمُ. Show us somebody who will testify and be a shaheed, a witness, that you are a messenger as you're claiming. So Allah then reveals this verse. This verse 19, Surah Al-An'am, is a response to the lie of the unbelievers who said, nobody's confirming that you're a messenger of God, not the Jews, not the Christians. We can't find anybody who will testify that you are the messenger of God. Bring us somebody to witness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلِ اللَّهُ شَهِيدٌ بَيْنِكُمْ. I am the witness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I am the witness. قُلْ أَيُّ شَيْءٍ أَكْبَرُ الشَّهَادَةِ. Say to them, what's the greatest testimony that you can have? قُلْ اللَّهُ شَهِيدٌ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكُمْ. Allah is the witness between me and between you. And then, so that's the beginning of the verse. Then the point that Imam al-Bukhari brings, وَأُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ لِأُنذِرَكُمْ بِهِ وَمَنْ بَلَغَ. And then this Quran has been revealed to me, so that I warn you, bihi, لِأُنذِرَكُمْ bihi. Imam al-Bukhari says, لِأُنذِرَكُمْ أهل Mecca. so that I warn you, the people of Mecca, وَمَنْ بَلَغْ, and all that it reaches, لِأُنذِرَكُمْ بِهِ وَمَنْ بَلَغْ, all that receive the message of the Quran, they are also being warned by the message of the Quran. لِأُنذِرَكُمْ بِهِ وَمَنْ بَلَغْ. So Imam al-Bukhari is explaining that the kum, لِأُنذِرَكُمْ, I warn you, is a reference to the people of Mecca, and وَمَنْ بَلَغْ is everybody else. And all that it reaches is everybody else. And then the verse ends by the shahada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the shahada, the testimony of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where the Prophet is told to tell the unbelievers, أَإِنَّكُمْ لَتَشْهَدُونَ أَنَّ مَعَ اللَّهِ آلِهَةً أُخْرَى. Are you going to testify that there are gods along with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? قُلْ لَا أَشْهَدُ. I'm never going to testify that. I'm never going to accept that. I'm never going to testify that. إِنَّمَا هُوَ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ. For truly, He subhanahu wa ta'ala is ilahun wahid, is one God. وَإِنَّنِي بَرِيءٌ مِّمَّا تُشْرِكُونَ. And I am free of anything. I have nothing to do with anything that you worship. So the indhar of the Prophet, warning of the Prophet to the people of Mecca, came through the Quran. And the warning of the Prophet to other than those, all those received, also comes through the Quran. The next word that he looks at comes in verse 26. But verse 26 has to be looked at with verse 25. Verse 25, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَسْتَمِعُ إِلَيْكَ. Amongst them, the unbelievers, there are those who listen to you. And here there's a warning even for the believers, because although these verses are about unbelievers, but there's a warning even for the believers. Because here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the states of unbelievers who are listening to the Prophet and reciting the Quran and are completely unaffected by the Quran. And there's a warning in that. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is condemning kuffar, unbelievers. They would sit in Mecca, listen to the Quran, and it wouldn't change anything, wouldn't stir anything within their hearts. The warning there is a Muslim who listens to the Quran and is untouched by the Quran. He's untouched by the Quran. And when you look at the people of Mecca, the likes of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and he's reciting the Quran, people flock around him. Unbelievers flock around, sit around him, just almost like bewitched by the Quran, almost like dazzled by his recitation of the Quran. It's even mentioned some reports of Seerah that when the leaders of Mecca would leave Mecca during the summer and they would go to Ta'if, because that's where they would, Ta'if was cool in the summer, so they would spend the summers there. One summer, they came back, the whole of Mecca had become Muslim because of the recitation of the Quran. And it was only the fear that the leaders of Mecca put into the populace of Mecca that made them abandon Islam. But one summer, the whole of Mecca had become Muslim because of the recitation of the Quran. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and others reciting the Quran affected the hearts of the average, the poor, the weak, the oppressed amongst them. It was the leaders who forced them to return back into kufr. So the warning here is not to be like those leaders who sat there listening to the Quran. And imagine this, mashallah, now you got a qari al-Quran, muqri al-Quran, a reciting the Quran, who recites the Quran, and it really touches the heart. Imagine listening to it from the Prophet reciting the Quran. Then imagine being unaffected by that recital. Imagine you're hearing it directly from the one that it was revealed to, the one that's revealed to. Yet you're still untouched by that. At one level, you could say, perhaps there's something within the reciter because of which it didn't affect you. Not the word, but the reciter. There may be something within the reciter, because of that it didn't touch your heart. But what are you going to say about the recital of the Prophet? Yeah, here you have people whose heart is stone cold, that nothing is penetrating into their hearts when they're hearing. So that's the warning. Listen to the Quran and be affected by the Quran. Be touched by the Quran. And that's why the Prophet said, اقرأوا القرآن وابكوا فإن لم تبكوا فتباكوا. Read the Quran and cry. Get affected by it. Let the Quran touch your heart. And if you can't cry, then fake the tears. Tabakaw. Then fake the tears. Pretend you're crying. فَإِن لَمْ تَبْكُوا فَتَبَاكَوْا. Tafa'ul, the wazn of tafa'ul in Arabic, one of the meanings of this word form is to pretend. Like ta'ama, to pretend that you're blind, that you can't see. Tanama, to pretend that you're asleep. Tanama. Tabaka, to pretend you're crying. فَإِن لَمْ تَبْكُوا فَتَبَاكَوْا. If you can't cry, and pretend it, fake it, make yourself cry, even if you're not really crying. So don't be like somebody whose heart is like stone cold, that nothing in the Quran enters into it. So this verse, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَسْتَمِعُ إِلَيْكَ, Allah condemns them. Verse 25. Amongst them, there's some who are listening to you. وَجَعَلْنَا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً. But we placed on their hearts akinna, a ghulf. We placed on their hearts like coverings on their hearts, and yafqahu, so that they can't understand it. Their hearts are diseased, so we've sealed their hearts. Their hearts are diseased with kufr, so we seal their hearts so they can't understand it. وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا, and in their hearts we place a deafness. Like it's almost like there's lead in their ears that they can't hear the Quran. And even if they were to see every single sign, they still wouldn't believe it. These are people listening to the Prophet reciting the Quran. Even if they show miracle after miracle after miracle, they still won't believe it. حتى إذا جاءوك يجادلونك يقول الذين كفروا إن هذا إلا أساطير الأولين. To the point that they will come and they'll argue with you about the Quran. They'll argue with you. People listen to the Quran, but there's a seal on their heart and there's a deafness that's descended upon their ears, that even though they're hearing it, they're not really listening to it. They're not listening to the message that's being conveyed. Even though they're hearing it, they're not really hearing anything. They're not paying any attention to the message that's coming through within the Quran. And then they'll come and argue with the Prophet, and then they will say, In hadha illa asatir al-awwal. These are only fables of the ancients. These are only just stories that are made up. All that's being recited, stories that are made up. And unfortunately now, Zanadiqa, you find in people who rejected Islam saying the same thing about the Quran. These are just all stories that have been made up. Then the word that Imam al-Bukhari touches upon, وَهُمْ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ وَيَنْأَوْنَ عَنْهُ. وَهُمْ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ وَيَنْأَوْنَ عَنْهُ. And there's something about the balagha here, the wording here, يَنْهَوْنَ يَنْأَوْنَ, difference of one letter. There's a pattern there. وَهُمْ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ. These leaders, they forbid people from coming to listen to the Quran. They forbid from it. They forbid people. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَا تَسْمَعُوا لِهَذَا الْقُرْآنِ وَالْغَوْا فِيهِ. That's what they used to do. As the Prophet stood at the Kaaba reciting the Quran in prayer, the unbelievers would drive people away. They would say, لَا تَسْمَعُوا لِهَذَا الْقُرْآنِ. Don't listen to this Quran. وَالْغَوْا فِيهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَغْلِبُونَ. They would turn people, وَهُمْ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ. They forbid people from it. وَيَنْأَوْنَ عَنْهُ. يَنْأَوْنَ. The verb نَأَى يَنْأَى بَعُدَ يَبْعُدُ. يكون بعيدا. They themselves are distant from it. And that's what Imam al-Bukhari explains. يَنْأَوْنَ يَبْعُدُ. They themselves are distant. They themselves are distant from it. So they turn people away from the Quran, and they themselves are far away from the Quran. So although these two verses are describing the state of the unbelievers, the leads of unbelievers, there's a warning in there. As we listen to the Quran, actually pay attention to the Quran. And as we said, even if we don't understand what we're reading, at least we understand whose words it are. At least we understand who we're talking to. And by that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow something to enter. Because remember, these unbelievers who are turning people away, they understood the Arabic of the Quran better than any human being alive now can understand it. The likes of Abu Jahl, the likes of Abu Lahab, they understood the Quran, the words of the Quran better than any human being alive. Because they were aqha al-Arab. They were the most eloquent of Arabs. But akinnatan an yafqahu. On their hearts there was a seal. On their ears there was a deafness there. They couldn't hear anything. Why? Because the disease that are like their hearts were rotten. Their souls were rotten. And that's what you don't ever want to affect you. The rust that descends in the heart until it becomes rotten, to the point you're listening to the Quran, but you're not really seeing anything. You're hearing the Quran, you're not really touched by the Quran. To the point that, the worst case, turning people away from the recitation of the Quran because they themselves are distant from the Quran. So that's the word that Imam al-Bukhari explains here. يَنْأَوْنَ, meaning they are distant. وَهُمْ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ وَيَنْأَوْنَ عَنْهُ. Then he goes on to the word tubsala, which inshallah bismillah ta'ala we look at tomorrow. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Are there any questions on what we read today? Yeah? Okay.
You know, when you were saying that every ayat of the Quran is 6,236,
yeah.
And it's about reciting. Is that just us reading Quran rather than memorizing Quran?
It's just reading. Because I asked some of our teachers that, and they said it doesn't say in any hadith that you must have memorized it. There's nothing mentioned in the words of the Prophet, it's those who memorized it. It's just, you're told, read as you used to read in this world. So it's just about reading it rather than just memorizing it. Allahu Akbar. Do you have anything else? Khalas. Saida?
You mentioned two types of hypocrites.
Yeah. Yeah, the second type is a hypocrite in behavior. He's a believer, but essentially he's a bad believer. He's a believer, but he's not considered a kafir. And the Prophet gave us certain signs of them. In authentic hadith, he mentioned, for example, he said, إذا وعد أخلف وإذا اؤتمن خان وإذا خاصم فجر. When he speaks, he lies. Signs of a hypocrite in behavior. These are Muslims, but they have signs of hypocrisy within them. When they speak, they lie. When he's given a trust, he betrays his trust. When he gets into an argument, he swears. When he gets into an argument, he swears. No, I think that's four. They're the four. So the four signs by which the Prophet identified a hypocrite in behavior. That type of, if you're somebody unfortunate has these bad qualities within them, that when you speak to people, you lie to people. If you make a promise, you break your promise. That's it. If you make a promise, you break your promise. If you get into an argument, you start swearing. If somebody gives you a trust, like he tells you a secret and you break the trust. If somebody has that, they're still a believer. The Prophet called them munafiq. He called that person a hypocrite, but that's a hypocrite in behavior, not a hypocrite in faith. And they're not the ones that are spoken of as being in the lowest level of hellfire. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Any other question? Rashid? No? Zubair? Okay. Alhamdulillah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. وإلى حضرة النبي الفاتحة. اللهم صل وسلم. بسم الله.